Welcome to our crash course in the 3 types of school. The goal of this episode is to introduce the 3 types of school model. And we hope that one day the 3 types of school is the way that we discuss all important matters in education. So the 3 types of school model helps leaders, teachers, parents, and students better understand schools. For leaders and teachers, it clarifies how to navigate and improve their work. And for parents and students, it offers insights into how to engage more effectively with the school system.
Now, there are 3 types, and the 3 types are expert, coach, and counsellor. We'll define each in a moment, but first, why do we need these 3 terms, expert, coach, and counsellor, to make sense of school?
Well, there's a misconception about school. When we talk about school, we talk as though all schools are fundamentally the same, and they're not. Fundamentally, there are 3 different ways to approach school. We use the terms expert, coach, and counselor to highlight differences in school organization, culture, practices, and the types of people and values that flourish or struggle in each type.
Without expert, coach, and counsellor, schools blur into an unintended mix. Naming the type clarifies its influence, reveals what's shaping your school, and helps you engage intentionally instead of being swept up in their momentum. Again, the 3 types are expert, coach, and counsellor. And while there are expert, coach, and counsellor schools, there are also expert, coach, and counsellor leaders, teachers, parents, and students.
We're saying that people lean toward a type. We have the best chance to thrive when our type aligns with our school. And the opposite is true too. You can also be the right person in the wrong place. When we don't align with our school's type, it will wear both sides down. Both sides try to force the other to be the type that they want. So in order to find your match and avoid being stuck in a school you aren't aligned with, we identify 3 types of schools, expert, coach, and counselor, and recognize 3 types of teachers, 3 types of leaders, 3 types of parents, and 3 types of students. Knowing your type is important. For school leaders and teachers, find environments that support the type of education you believe in. For parents, identify which types align with what you want for your child and what's best for them. And for students, discover which types work best for you and which don't.
So a quick summary there. The 3 types are 3 distinct approaches to school. Schools aren't all the same. There are 3 main types, the expert, coach, and counsellor, each with unique values, organization, and culture. The alignment of these matter. People naturally lean towards a type, and we thrive when our type aligns with our schools. Misalignment, however, can cause strain for everyone involved. The 3 types tool. Knowing these types can help leaders, teachers, parents, and students recognize the environments that support their goals and values, leading to a more fulfilling school experience.
Okay, so what are the differences between expert, coach, and counselors in schools? There's plenty to say about the differences among these 3, but we'll focus in on what matters most. We'll do this in 3 parts. In part 1, we'll look how the 3 types represent completely different and competing approaches to 1, how the school is organized, 2, how the classroom is organized, 3, what their type of teacher does, and 4, what their type of leader does. In part 2, we'll show how knowing this helps solve some of the most common problems for our schools, and in part 3, we'll introduce you to a bold idea for where we can go from here.
But first, there are a few important notes to avoid confusion about the 3 types. This is not a new thing to do. It isn't this year's new fad. It's not another task on your to-do list. It's a way to filter and make sense and better handle what you're already dealing with. A question we're always asked is, which is best? Well, we all want good schools for our kids, and it only makes sense that that question, okay, I get that there's 3, but which type of school is best, is going to be asked. How should we do school is another common question. And the answer is, there are 3 types of school, expert, coach, and counsellor. Each has their pros and cons. Each can be done well, okay, or poorly, but one type is best suited to your school's unique context. Now, depending on that school context, either the expert, coach, or counselor will serve students best. A little more on what these types mean in a moment.
Yes, and one final idea before we discuss these differences. Type is more important than pedagogy. So we often think about types of teaching in terms of the pedagogy, but the name of a pedagogy doesn't tell you which of the three you are walking into. Any educational approach, be it Montessori, Waldorf, International Baccalaureate, they can all be delivered through these three types. So you could have an expert Montessori, coach Montessori, or counselor Montessori school. Some types will be a better fit for certain pedagogy, that's true. But remember, each teacher or leader leans towards a type. And we filter what we do in schools through our type. So we'll filter any pedagogy through our type and make it either more expert, more coach, or more counselor.
So first up, part one, the differences. Let's look at the foundations. You can think of each school as trying to build either a pyramid, a star, or a circle. Let's associate the expert with the pyramid, the coach with the star, and the counselor with the circle. We'll see how these actually symbolize their organizational structures in a moment. Schools have the choice of building that pyramid, star, or circle, and each shape requires a different technique to create it. Each has its own way to build, and you can't build one with another's materials. So you see high-performing schools by accident achieve their success by aligning with a single school type and building it. They build it and they live the organizational shape that works for them. Most schools, however, are divided. They're trying to build conflicting structures. This leaves them with incomplete shapes that don't serve as an adequate environment for optimal living. That split wastes time, resources, and effort. And so most schools are in an unintentional blend of types, with one still winning the tug of war more than others. Why is this?
Well, there's a problem. Lots of things sound good in education. There is no shortage of good ideas for what we could do in schools. The abundance of best practices makes us want to try everything. But not every idea is neutral. Some align better or worse depending on a school's type. But what's good in education actually depends on how well it supports a specific type. It allows us to curate the variety of good ideas and discern which are actually a better fit for us and which are not. When needing to decide on what your school should start or stop doing, ask, does this choice support the shape we need for the school type we want?
So let's pick apart the three types and ask, how are decisions in the school and classroom made? The three types represent how school decisions are made. Experts rely on the pyramid, coaches rely on the star, and counselors rely on the circle. What's interesting is that the way a school makes decisions mirrors how decisions are made in the classroom. It looks the same on different scales. Whether you zoom in or zoom out, you keep seeing similar shapes. In other words, the structure, values, and decision-making process of the school are echoed in the classroom dynamics, creating a consistent pattern at every level.
So what does this look like across the expert, coach, and counselor? Well, the expert organizes its school via pyramid. It has clear-cut levels of hierarchy and wants decisions made by those in positions of responsibility who typically are higher up the hierarchy. School decisions are made by those in charge. Classroom decisions are made by the teacher. They have autonomy to decide for their class. For the coach, coach organizes via star. This involves interconnected levels of hierarchy. Coach schools want decisions to be made across staff and layers of hierarchy. However, those in a leadership position still hold more sway in the decision-making process. But there is more democratic decision-making in the school. School decisions are made by the staff and/or special roles, whereas classroom decisions are made democratically and using data by the staff. Your classroom is a part of a larger school-wide approach to teaching. And finally, the counselor organizes via circle. Here, the hierarchy is flattened. Counselor schools want school decisions to be made by all who are in the school who wish to put their voice forward. This includes staff, students, and even parents. Counselor schools want classroom decisions to be made by those in the classroom.
So to review, how are school decisions made? Well, for an expert-centered school, they're top-down. Those in positions of responsibility decide for those they oversee. They may consult, but only a few get to make the decisions. For a coach-centered school, decisions are made across the group, and some do pull more weight than others. It's a system of consultation and building consensus. The counselor-centered school, all parties hold the same weight in decision-making. Again, consultation is made, but now consent is at the center of the decision-making process. And so how are decisions made about teaching? In the expert classroom, teacher discernment. In the coach classroom, through data and goal setting. And from the counselor's classroom, student meaning. Who gets to make those decisions? Again, in an expert-centered school, the teacher may approach with, "This is how I teach. This is how my class works." In a coach-centered school, decisions inside the classroom to do with teaching and learning are made with the staff via a school-wide instructional approach. Teachers are no longer deciding all aspects of the approach. Instead, they're implementing the school's approach. And we begin to describe this by saying, "This is how we teach." In a counselor-centered school, student voice begins to play a large part. And we, that is the we including all teachers, all members of the community, all students, will decide what teaching and learning looks like.
So at this point, it's quite common for people to say, well, I'm a bit of all three. Yes, we are all a blend of these three roles, but one is always your home base. Throughout a day, a week, or a year, you'll naturally shift between being an expert, coach, or counselor. Each has its moments. However, if you filmed yourself over time, you'd find one role comes up most often. It's your go-to, like your reliable default role. Ask yourself, which one would you not be willing to compromise on? Your discernment, meaning you're an expert, data and goals, meaning you're a coach, or student meaning you're a counselor.
Part 3. What is the role of a teacher? Each teacher has a natural lean towards one of the three types. While we may see parts of ourselves in all of them, there is one that feels like home. Knowing your true type, whether it's expert, coach, or counselor, is essential. You find meaning in contributing as that type, not in masquerading as another. If you are an acorn, you're going to become an oak. Even if someone tries to put you on a trellis and shape you into a grapevine, you'll still grow into an oak tree. Just as, if you were a grapevine, no amount of forcing you to grow vertical will turn you into that oak tree. If we use the concept of climbing a mountain, an expert sets the goal and sets the path for students. A coach will set the goal, but they'll help you and work with you to find your best path to that goal. A counselor will help you to find your goals and help you to find the best path to those goals. So an expert gets you to the finish line if you follow their steps. A coach gets you to perform a personal best to that finish line, and a counselor helps you to negotiate and chart out your own personal path. What do educators want? The expert educator wants autonomy. They're at the top of the pyramid and should be trusted to teach as they see best. It ends up being like several unique schools under one roof. The coach wants collaboration with staff. They want to be part of a school-wide educational approach. What you give up in autonomy, you gain in terms of support and co-planning with the whole school. For the counselor, negotiation with the students with the aim of personalized learning is key. The school-wide approach is to let the student lead the way.
These three roles, expert, coach, and counselor, aren't just variations of teaching. They're distinct professions, each with its own set of skills. Excelling in one doesn't mean you'll succeed in the others. Knowing which type aligns with your strengths and purpose as a teacher is crucial. That's why we need clearer language. Teacher isn't enough. Expert teacher, coach teacher, and counselor teacher define these seismic differences in terms of approaching the classroom. There is an expert approach, coach approach, and counselor approach to any topic in schools. For example, let's look at technology in schools. This doesn't belong to just experts, coaches, or counselors. For example, let's look at the use of the online platform Teams in schools. This was common during the pandemic. The expert approach uses Teams in a way to help students find out what they need to do. It was a medium for contact with their expert, with the authority. Whereas coach-centered schools use Teams more as a location to access differentiated resources and assessments, the focus here being on opportunities. Whereas the counselor approach to using Teams was more of a medium for connection, communicating and collaborating with others, while still putting personal meaning at the center of it.
So, we suggest, first, know which type you prefer, which is home base for you. One feels right for you. It's where you do your best work. It's what you will try to be no matter where you are. 2, know which type your school is now and ask yourself, are you a match or not? Number 3, if you are a match for your school's current type, help your school to be the best of that type it can be. Number 4, if you find that you're not a match for the type that your school currently is, you need to ask, is it your school that needs to change, or is it that you need to change schools? If you come to the conclusion that your current school is not a good fit and is unlikely to move towards your type, while it might not be fun to say, you are likely to do better somewhere that is more a match for the type that you are.
Now let's look at what each type of leader does. Each type needs a different kind of leadership. If we were to give the leaders of each of the 3 types a sentence, it might go like this. Experts hire good people and get out of their way, and they only step in when necessary. For the coach, we are more effective as a united staff than as individual teachers. And for the counselor, every voice matters equally, be it leaders, staff, students, or parents. We touched on this previously, but expert leaders consult, and then they make the decisions. Coach leaders consult, and then also use data and democracy to make decisions with the staff. And counselor leaders consult, and then find consent. All parties are making the decision via consent.
Part 2, how the 3 types help with common problems in school. One common issue is drifting between the types. It's the root of wasted time, energy, relationships, and resources in many schools. Too many schools drift between these options, between these types, starting in one direction, changing courses, and then going in the opposite direction. This constant shifting drains energy, making it impossible to build a stable foundation. And instead of strength, we end up with structures that demand constant fixes. As we already stated, the question is, does the choice support the shape that we need for the school type that we want? Does it allow us to make conscious decisions with a model in mind?
Another common problem in schools that the 3 types model helps with is miscommunication. It helps understanding different perspectives by seeing the 3 types in action. When we are talking to each other, we're not always hearing each other. For example, all 3 types can use the same word, but each type hears and interprets that term differently. For example, take self-directed learning. For experts, self-directed learning is about students staying on task independently without supervision. For coaches, self-directed learning is offering students choices or paths towards the teacher or curriculum goals while boosting achievement and letting students choose their own strategies. However, for counselors, self-directed learning, it's all about personal inquiry, with students guiding their own learning alongside the teacher. What they will learn, how they will learn, when they will learn, and as many elements as possible are up for negotiation between the student and the teacher, making it self-directed. So each of the three types defines a term through its own lens, and recognizing these three perspectives is essential for real collaboration. Without it, we risk dismissing others as doing it wrong or getting lost in misunderstandings because we don't see that people mean the same things as we do when we use a term. The three types gives us a way to reduce unnecessary conflict and misunderstandings. They help us see why others who care just as deeply may have very different, even opposing ideas about what's best for our students. Asking others to define and give examples of a term is a sure way to find out which type they are really speaking from. Beneath every conversation, there's an underlying value system at work. People have core priorities that shape their choices. Experts value security and trust. Coaches value growth and opportunity. And counselors value authenticity and inclusion. These priorities fuel their actions. Understand a person's priority, and you'll see what truly drives them. Challenge it, and you'll meet resistance. Each group has an inherent good: responsibility for experts, achievement for coaches, and meaning for counselors. Though rarely discussed outright, these essentials guide each group's decisions. When faced with challenges, each group doubles down. Experts push for trust, coaches for growth, and counselors for inclusion. These differences often lead to debates, each side defending their own vision of what's needed for students. You could visualize that any heated discussion in a school is actually just three different groups of people shouting at each other repeatedly, responsibility, responsibility, responsibility. No, no, no. Achievement, achievement, achievement. No, meaning, meaning, meaning. At the core, all conflicts in schools seem to be a back and forth between these three types.
Sheens. Appearances can be deceiving. Now that you know to listen for certain values, when you hear someone using the language of a type and conclude that they are that type, when actually they may mean something different. As we talked about, the concept of self-directed doesn't necessarily mean you are a coach or a counselor or an expert. You could have different definitions, or you could be doing it for different reasons. One example we've come across in the past is the idea of doing meditation. Now, this might lead us to think this is a counselor-centered approach, as it's centered on well-being and meaning. However, when we speak to those teachers and leaders of that school, they start to tell us how meditation has improved standardized test scores, and we realize, oh, the underlying meaning was not what we thought it was. So you should ask for an example and reasons why somebody is carrying out a particular action, rather than assuming that we know their type. Let's make you a black belt at the three types and help you spot what often tricks people. Once you spot these three types, you'll see how some people or schools talk like one type, but act like another. We call this a sheen. The words say one thing, but the real motivations lie elsewhere. Using another type's language or actions isn't necessarily a way to deceive, but it is a way to serve a different type's values. That's what we mean by sheens.
So to summarize some of the key points here, the three types represent different decision-making models. Experts use hierarchy, coaches use interconnected teams, and counselors favor consensus. 2. Roles and values. Each type values different things. Experts prioritize autonomy, coaches value collaboration, and counselors emphasize inclusion and meaning. Teacher and school alignment. Teachers align with one type. Finding congruence with the school's type promotes harmony and reduces misalignment. Reducing misunderstandings. Terms have different meanings across the types, so clarifying which perspective and which type you are speaking with avoids miscommunication and fosters true collaboration.
And so with all of this in mind, here's how to use these ideas to make sense of schools and their differences. For parents and students, know what type of school you are in now. And know your type. You might be biased, but one type works better for your child. If you're an individual teacher or leader, again, know your type, know your school's type. If they match, work with your school to become a better version of that type. If not, either know what you can do, what you can and can't change, or try to find a school where you are a match. And if you're a leader or representing an entire school, again, know your type, know which is best for your context. Again, if they match, become a better version of that type. In summary, choose one type and do it well.
Part 3, a big, bold, new idea. We've discussed the 3 types of school, but now we'd like to address the idea of a 4th type of school, one that we are calling the facilitator. So if the only tool you have is a hammer, everything begins to look like a nail. Each school so far, as we've described them, expert, coach, and counselor, are a one-size-fits-all approach. Expert schools offer you experts, coach schools offer you coaches, and counselor schools offer you counselors, because each believes that it is best. Facilitator schools bring something new to the table. It recognizes that some students thrive with certain types more than others. So the facilitator focuses on finding the right fit. A facilitator school intentionally would offer expert, coach, and counselors under one roof for more flexibility and effectiveness. This approach allows for flexibility between types based on student needs, enabling teachers and leaders to fully express their strengths while collaborating across types. So what would this look like? Here are 3 possible steps to implementing the facilitator approach. 1, empower teachers. Let teachers be their type, but don't stop there. Encourage them to stretch and to step into the other types when needed. We all have the capacity to grow, to tap into the strengths of the expert, coach, or counselor within us. I mean, we are all 3 of them at different times. When teachers embrace their type while learning to be flexible across all 3, they unleash a greater potential. 2, match students with the right type. Align them with the teacher who resonates with their learning style, whether that's an expert, a coach, or a counselor. We can use diagnostic tools to find the perfect match so that students get the best fit and the teacher gets to teach at their best. And finally, 3, tailor teacher types to every subject. Take it one step further. For every subject, match the student with their type of teacher who can unlock their potential. This could mean that you might have an expert for math, a coach for sports, and a counselor for creative writing. It acknowledges more of what's already there. It acknowledges who the teacher is. It acknowledges who the student is, how both align or don't. You can choose to ignore this in your school, but it will continue to be a factor that influences your school across every class, teacher, and student. Like the 3 other types, this of course has pros and cons. It also has more moving parts and more ways it could go wrong. But it also has more gifts that it can bring that the previous types can't. There are a few examples of it at this time and plenty of details to sort out, but that's what we're working on here on the podcast and having conversations with those who are finding out how this facilitator approach looks in schools.
So if this 4th facilitator approach is compelling to you, right now there are 2 paths forward. 1, you could become a hacker. In this sense, that means you're a teacher working from this integrative value, but within an expert, coach, or counselor-centered school. And there are even those brave few pioneers attempting to create facilitator schools today. We'd recommend you listen to our episodes featuring Armin Sieber of the Integrales Tagesschule in Winterthur, Switzerland. And if you're still with us and you'd like to apply this to your own educational context, reach out. We're at reinventingeducationpodcast@gmail.com, and we can discuss all of these points in much, much more detail.
So to summarize the main points from this podcast, there are 3 types of schools. Schools are not all the same, but they do fall into 3 distinct categories: expert, coach, and counselor, each with their own unique organizational structures, teaching styles, and decision-making processes.
Number 2, naming matters. Identifying these types helps clarify what's already happening in schools. It allows leaders, teachers, and parents to work with the school's strengths instead of being caught in conflicts between the different approaches.
3, alignment is key. People, teachers, leaders, parents, and students naturally align with one of these 3 types. Thriving happens when your type matches your school. Misalignment causes frustration and inefficiency.
Number 4, this is not a new trend. The model isn't a new program or a task. It's a framework to help make sense of what's already happening and focus energy on what works best for your school.
5, it's contextual, not hierarchical. No type is inherently better than the others. What works depends on the school's context. Schools should build on the type that best serves their community and goals.
6, decision-making shapes our schools. Each type organizes decisions differently. The expert approaches from top-down authority, the coach through collaboration and data-driven decisions, and the counselor from consensus among all voices.
7, teaching reflects the school type. Teaching approaches follow the same patterns. Expert, the teacher decides how to teach. Coach, the staff collaboratively determines teaching strategies. And the counselor, students and teachers co-create the learning process.
8, drifting causes problems. Schools waste time and resources by drifting between the types, trying to adopt every new idea. Instead, they should focus on building the structure that matches their chosen type.
9, common terms, different meanings. Miscommunication happens when the same term means different things to different types. For example, self-directed learning means independence to an expert, options to a coach, and personal inquiry to a counselor.
10, find your fit. Understanding your own type and your school's type is vital. If they align, build on it. If they don't, consider whether it's time to adapt or to find a school that is a better match.
And finally, 11, the facilitator approach, or the 4th type of school. The 4th option is to bring an intentional focus onto all 3 types into a single school. This is done to serve students and the people in it. And this is the cutting edge of education.
Lots of great information there, Rob. Again, follow up with us at reinventingeducationpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Brandon.